Hello and welcome back to my channel. And if you're new here, don't forget to introduce yourself in the comments and tell me whereabouts in the world you are. In my last video, I showed you how to make a candle holder using a vintage teacup and saucer. I was testing out whether I should use my hot glue gun or E6000. I'll leave that video up here so you can see which one was the winner. I've now decided to spray paint my candle holders, but should I use primer or just go straight in with the paint? Well, that's going to be today's video. I'm Julie from Julie Davis Flower Workshops and Flower Start, the online flower arranging classes. As you can see, I've set myself up a little spray booth. It's a cardboard box and I've opened up the front of it and put a protective cloth over my table, so hopefully I will only get spray paint on my teacup and saucers and not everywhere else. I'm doing this outside on my patio table, and you do need to make sure you use your spray paint in a well ventilated location. You don't want to be inhaling any of those fumes. It's quite a good idea to put something around what you're spraying just to contain the overspray. If you spray outside on a windy day, you'll hardly get any paint coverage at all, and you'll see it all wafting away into the distance. For my experiment today, I'm going to be using a surface primer on one of the teacups, and then I'll add in the top coat of a white satin finish paint, and on the other I'm just going to use the top coat and see whether I can discern any difference between the two techniques. When spraying a 3D object like this teacup and saucer, you need to remember you won't be able to spray all of it at once. I'll probably have to do a spray over the top, wait for that to dry, and then turn it over and do the bottom side. I'm going to start with my primer first of all, so I give that a really good shake and apply it in lots of light coats. Here goes. So I'll leave that to dry, remembering that's my surface primer, and I will need to come back and do the underside of the cup. And then the next one, straight on with my top coat. So I'll shake the can again and do lots of light strokes. Comparing the two together, you can see that the top coat straight away has got better coverage and it's got a lovely satin finish. And as I move across to the primed saucer, it's a duller finish and not quite so solid. So I shall leave that to dry, flip them over and come back and do the same thing on the back of the cup and saucer. Now that my saucer is dry at the top, I'm flipping it over and adding in the paint on the bottom of the cup. So I start off with my surface primer. Now you can see here I'm spraying too close to the cup. I'm being a bit heavy-handed and I'm starting to get some drips. So learning from that, when I go to do the top coat on the other cup, I'm going with lighter spray slightly further away. Instead of trying to do it all in one go, I stop halfway and twist the cup round, making sure my coverage is really light. Now our paint is dry, it's time to compare the difference between the two techniques. So using the surface primer, just a very light coat, and it's got a slightly rougher texture to it, and the coverage wasn't great, but I think that was because I was rushing the bottom half, the cup half, and you can see those drips I was talking about. And with the top coat, the satin finish, just with one layer of paint, that's given me much better coverage and also a much smoother finish, and it's slightly shiny and smooth to the touch. Next, I'm going to add a second coat. So having done my primer, I'm going to use the satin finish on top of that and a second layer of satin finish on the other teacup and saucer. I'm changing my spray technique here slightly. In order to try and get coverage all the way around and the back side of the cup, I've picked the cup up with an old cloth and using that to make sure I can get coverage on all sides. I think in hindsight the box I was using was too small and there just wasn't enough elbow room to get into all the nooks and crannies of my teacup and saucer. And then on to my second cup. So this is adding a second layer of satin finish onto the first layer of satin spray paint. So I'll leave those to dry and report back. 24 hours later and my teacup candle holders are finished. To be honest, I can't tell which one is which had the primer and which one I went straight in with the top coat. Having got my candle holders perfectly white, I'm now going to add in a decorative detail. I really love the trend at the moment for the enamelware farmhouse style look to pieces. So I've bought myself a paint pen. I've done this before using a pen, a normal Sharpie and also acrylic paint to paint around the edges, and it's been okay, but it's not been perfect. So I thought I would test out how well these paint pens work. So the pen looks like a regular marker. My one's called Unipaint and it marks on anything. And there aren't any instructions, it's just those handy little pictures that tell you what to do. So it looks like I've got to shake my pen up and down and then dab with contact to get the paint running. And at the moment the nib is this pale honey colour, so I'm presuming that will eventually turn black once the paint gets moving. Can you see it there, just the blackness starting to show? And using it like any marker pen, going around the edges, I think I'm going to start at the bottom just in case I go wrong. My first impression is this is going on the same as my Sharpie pen did. It's a bit patchy, the coverage, but I'll keep going. That's working a bit better because I'm aiming my pen downwards rather than doing it up in the air. Oh, I might have spoken too soon. You see here that the ink just seems to peter out. I must admit I'm slightly disappointed because it's going on no easier than my regular Sharpie pen or the acrylic paints I've used. I had imagined it would almost be like coating, painting with nail varnish and getting a nice thick layer. So it doesn't really look farmhouse style at all yet. Let's have a go with the handle here. It's just not going on at all. Perhaps I'm doing something wrong. As I say, I was really disappointed with this ink pen. I started shaking it, holding the pen upright, pushing down to release the ink. I ended up shaking the pen without the lid on and got splatters over my cloth and actually over the teacup as well. And eventually I just gave up. So I actually went and got my acrylic paints out and had much more success. What I'm going to do now is try with my acrylic paint and see if I can get a better finish with that. So I'm squirting some out into my saucer. And this acrylic paint is just going on absolutely beautifully. Much more successful than the ink pen, going on faster and thicker and smoother. The only problem I've got with it is my hand isn't particularly steady and I do make a few mistakes, but actually when I look back on the project a few days later, I think I have managed to create sort of imperfections and chips that make this really look like vintage enamelware. I'm going to speed up this next section of film, but you can see me doing exactly the same thing, taking my paintbrush around the rim of the saucer, and then I'll go back in as well and paint the handle. So I finished painting and you can see that big blob of paint on the top, but actually in hindsight I'm rather pleased with that. An accident that does make the finished piece look more authentic and a much better coverage than the paint pen that I gave up on. I've now had these candle holders sitting on my kitchen table for a couple of days, and I will say the more I look at them, the more pleased I am with the finished effect. I think perhaps I just wasn't using my ink pen properly, but the technique with using the acrylic paint has worked out really well, and even the bits where my hand wasn't steady has added a bit of character to these pieces, and I'm really pleased with them. All that I need to do now is to add my wax candles to the top, and I've put a sprig of rosemary next to each one to keep the decoration really simple. So I've laid the table for lunch with my red checked gingham napkins and my own crockery that's got a black trim, and I suddenly find it's quite fashionable at the moment. So I hope you enjoy this project, and I'll see you again next time.